Welcome back, Cat 31 CATIA class. Today we're going to go over problem 4-1, sliding bracket. And it's going to take a few sketches to create this part, at least 3 sketches. So we're going to first focus on creating this front view sketch. And then we'll move on to other sketches to create the other features. Alright, so let's go ahead and focus on the front view of the sliding bracket. So let's go ahead and open up CATIA. Alright, so obviously I'm in the wrong workbench, so I opened up CATIA. I'm going to go ahead and close this file. I'm going to maximize this CATIA window and go to Start, Part Design. Alright, so I'm going to call this problem 4-1. And OK. And one thing I forgot to mention is this is going to be done in inches. So if we go back, this is to be done in inches. If you mistakenly use millimeters, that's okay. Not a problem. Alright, so let me go ahead and change the units to inches. First, let me fill up the screen with my CATIA session, maximize. There it is. Take advantage of the entire screen. Alright, so let me double check, make sure I'm in the right units. I'm going to go to Tools, Options, hit the plus sign on the General branch, and then go to Parameters and Measures branch, go to Units. And I'm already in inches. If you're not, if you're in millimeters, trying to go to inches, click on the length row, and then go to the drop down, and pick inches from the drop down. And OK. Okay, so you can pick any plane to create your sketch. I'm going to click on the vertical YZ plane. I can pre-select the plane I want to sketch on. And again, notice I am in Part Design. And I'm going to click on Sketch. Okay, so hold the wheel to pan. I'm going to hold the wheel on the mouse, move the mouse. Alright, so I'm going to start by creating the profile of the sliding bracket, but before I do, I'm going to first create the slot actually. So I want to first create the slot. Okay, as you can see, the slot is 3.28 inches from the base, and it has a width of 228 and a radius of 0.19. Alright, so I'm going to first create the slot roughly at these coordinates. Alright, so let's go ahead and create a slot. So go to the rectangle. As you can see, you go to the rectangle icon, go to the drop down arrow, gives you more options. And go to slot, or elongated hole, I should say, elongated hole, click. And I'm gonna center it with respect to the vertical. So I want my drawing or my sketch to be symmetrical about the vertical. I'm gonna take advantage of symmetry. Okay, so let me move this over. I want to see where I'm at with respect to the origin. So I'm gonna go 3.28 up roughly. Close enough. And then I'm going to go off to the left or to the right. So it's going to be 228 total width. So I'll just cut 228 in half, which is roughly 1.1. It's, so I'm just guesstimating anywhere close enough. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click. And we see a construction line. Think of it as your center line for the slot or elongated hole. Click, and then you have to click one more time to generate the radius, and click, and that's the radius. Even though it's an offset, this represents our radius. Okay, and our radius is 0.19, so click and space to deselect, double click on our offset, which is our radius, and our radius is 0.19. and OK or enter. And from the horizontal to the vertical is 3.28. Horizontal. I'm going to stick from the horizontal to the horizontal. We have a vertical dimension of 328. Okay, so let me double click, change this to 3.28 and OK. All right, and we have a center to center dimension. So let me click and space to deselect. And I can zoom in. I can use the magnifying glass to zoom in. Or you can use the wheel and right click button to zoom in and out. So hold the wheel and hold the right button and move. My mistake, tap the right button. Let go of the right button, hold the wheel, and then move the mouse up and down to zoom in. If you accidentally rotate like I just did, didn't mean to rotate, you can always click on the normal icon and now your sketch is parallel to your screen. Alright, so now we have a dimension from center to center. You can always pre-select the center line. Select dimensional constraint. Just a lot easier than picking center to center. You can just select the line. Okay, position your dimensional constraint, double click, and that's 2.28 and OK. Alright, so notice the arcs are white. So that tells us it's not fully constrained. That means something is missing as far as constraints. It can be a relationship constraint. It can be a dimension, a measurement, right? So if I was to left mouse click and hold the arc, notice it's free to move left to right. All right, so let me zoom out a little bit. I'll click on the magnifying glass to zoom out. Okay, so notice I can move this left to right, so it's not locked horizontally. It's locked vertically. I cannot move it up or down. Vertically, it's locked by this 328. Now the size of the slot is 228, so we cannot change the size of the slot, but we can slide it left to right because we don't have a horizontal dimension or relationship to the vertical. So what I'm going to do is, let me move this dimension outward a little bit. I'm trying to grab the center of the arc. So what I want to do is, I'm going to zoom in. What I want to do is, I want these two center points of the arcs, to be symmetrical about the vertical. Okay, so I'm going to hold the control key, select. I know it's hard to see the little gray dot representing the center of the arc. Okay, there it is, selected. It's orange. I know it's hard to see. Here's the other one. It's gray. Once I select it, it'll turn orange. And you can tell that I've selected those points. If you're not sure, you can always open up the tree. See, it shows that I've selected the points of this line. So line 1 is defined by these two endpoints. Okay, so I'm still holding on to the control key. And then I'm going to pick the vertical. So let me let go of the control key so I can open this up. Here's the vertical. All right, so I'm going to hold on to the control key. I already have point 1 and point 2 selected. And I'm going to pick the vertical. And you have to pick the vertical last. And the reason is because this is going to be my line of symmetry. Okay, so now I've selected my 2 points and my vertical. I can now let go of the control key. And I'm going to give it a symmetry relationship. And you're going to see the slot center itself about the vertical once I give it a symmetry relationship. So let's give it a symmetry. So here's symmetry. And when I click, you're going to see the slot center itself about the vertical axis. In 3, 2, 1, don't blink. Notice it centered it about the vertical. And OK. And it's hard to see, but we have this, looks like a line in two semi-filled circles on each side. So if I go to constraints, that's the symmetry symbol that you see light up. All right, so now the slot or elongated hole is locked in place. We have all its dimensions. All right, so you can zoom in, zoom out. Okay, next step is to create the profile. Now, I can use profile with arcs, but I'm going to show you a different way. I'm going to do nothing but sharp corners in some areas. All right, so let's go ahead and create this profile. So I'm just going to guesstimate the location. I'm going to start. I'll start from this upper corner. Or you know what? I'll start from down here. I'll start from this bottom corner. Okay, so this is 228. So if I cut 228 in half, that's 114. So from the origin, I'm going to go 114 to the left roughly. Then I'll go up. Then I can create my tangents. And some of these I can leave them as sharp corners. Some of these I will leave as sharp corners because I want to show you how to use the fillet command. All right, so this little fillet, I'm going to leave it as a sharp corner. I will go ahead and create these radii, these fillets. All right, so let's go ahead and start creating the profile at 228. And I'll work my way around the slot and just guesstimate the size. All right, so let's go ahead and start. Now I'll actually start from this. You know what? I'll start from this point right here. So this is roughly at 0.88. Then I'm going to go over. I'll go over around an inch, then come back down, and come across, and then work my way up. All right, so let's go ahead and start, and we'll start from this center point. Once I draw this left portion of it, then I'll mirror it over. Okay, so let's go ahead and use the profile command, profile. And we're roughly close to about an inch, right? Or just under an inch. So we'll start around here. So you can see up here what my vertical coordinate is. Let me make sure I'm normal to the screen. Looks like it was a little crooked, but there it is. All right, so I'm just going to guesstimate the dimension. I'll come back and fix it. So we're going to go all the way down to the horizontal. I'm just guesstimating the size. All right, so we got this portion of it. Obviously the dimensions are slightly off, but that's okay. We'll come back and add our dimensions. So now we can add an arc and then another arc. Then from here I'll go straight. I'll keep this as a sharp corner and then come back to the vertical. Okay, so I'm going to go up, create the arc around the slot roughly, close enough, and then keep this a sharp corner and finish at the halfway point. Okay, so let's go to arc. Okay, so I'm going to get close to this slot. Okay, then I'm going to create another arc, as you can see. And it's supposed to be centered to this point. Okay, so I'm just going to get it close enough. Doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, now there's supposed to be another little arc here that we can add. I'm going to leave it as a sharp corner. I'm going to leave it as sharp corner. So I want to show you how to use the fillet command. Okay, and click. And I'm going to go halfway to the vertical. And see the dashed blue line? So the dashed blue line is actually tracking this center point or the vertical axis, and click. Okay, so we're done. So we can actually turn off profile command and click in space to deselect. All right, so let's throw in some dimensions. So let's throw in the dimensions at the bottom. All right, so 228, so 114, right? Take half of 228, that's 114. And this is 0.26. Okay, so let's take care of the 0.26, and then we'll do the 114. Okay, so this thickness, I'm going to add a dimensional constraint. Of 0.26. Double click, change it to 0.26. And okay. And then we're going to take half of 228. So I'm going to go dimensional constraint. I'm going to go from the vertical to this vertical. Okay, so half of 228 is 1.14. 1.14. And okay, there it is. All right, so let's go ahead and add a dimension to this line from the horizontal to this horizontal. And that's 0.88. Horizontal. So once again, dimensional constraint from horizontal to horizontal. Click to position it, and let's change this to 0.88. And okay. All right, now this line should have turned green, and it did not. This should have turned green. The ones that are green, I cannot move, but this one, it's free to move, which I don't want it to move, right? It's supposed to be anchored to the horizontal. So when I created this profile, it didn't automatically generate a constraint to the horizontal. It was supposed to, so I didn't click good enough. So, see, let me click in space to deselect. So I'm going to hold on to the control key and add a coincidence constraint between this horizontal and this vertical. Yours probably did generate the coincidence. If it did not, then let's go ahead and create it. Okay, so that's it. Let's add a relationship of coincidence in 3, 2, 1, don't blink. And now it's coincident. Okay, so okay. And you'll see that little ring. It's hard to see that little ring, but that tells us we have a coincidence between this horizontal and the horizontal axis, so it locks it in place horizontally. All right, so now let's move on. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a constraint of concentricity, so that the center of the arc is lined up with the center of this arc. It's hard to see, but there's a little gray dot here. That's the center for the arc. And then this green dot is the center of this small arc. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pre-select the two arcs. So I'm going to hold on to the control key. So first click in space or hit escape on the keyboard to deselect anything or to get out of any command, just in case you are in something. Right, so I'm going to hold on to the control key, click on the arc, click on the small arc, then I'm going to add a relationship constraint and make it concentric. So when you make them concentric, they share the same center point. Okay, so I'm going to click concentric and don't blink in 3, 2, 1. Notice now the large arc and the little arc are centered about each other's center point. Okay, so they share the same center point. Okay. Okay, so this arc, it's white. It's not fully constrained yet, but its center is locked. It's locked with the center of this smaller arc. All right, so let's go ahead and give it a radius. We'll give these two a radius. Okay, so let's go ahead and look for that dimension. So 2x, that tells us that there are two arcs. So 2x, that's the quantity with the radius of 0.9. So these are 0.9. And this one, right? 2x, meaning there's two of them, quantity of 2, with a radius of 0.76. Okay, so let's do a radius of 0.76 and a radius of 0.9 or 0.90. Okay, so I'm going to give this a dimensional constraint, a radius of 0.76. Okay, double click on the radius, make it 0.76. And okay, there it is. Now this one, I want to give it a radius, but for some reason, actually, I want you to notice that it generated a tangency between this arc. Now it's hard to see, but there's a faded circle in the background. So somehow it generated a tangency between the arc, if you were to extend it, and this horizontal, which I didn't intend to do. All right, so let's say you don't notice this. Maybe you don't have it, but on mine it did generate it, and it was auto-generated. It's something that I didn't want. So what's going to happen is when I do add that radius of 0.90, notice it's going to turn magenta, letting me know, hey, you're over constraint. Let me go ahead and double click and type in 0.90 for my radius and OK. So it's fighting other constraints, right? So notice it's turning magenta and in some case almost a burgundy, like danger. You have too many constraints. And part of that problem is this tangency, which I don't want. Okay, so notice when I click on this tangency, it's telling me, hey, this line and this circle or arc, this partial circle, are tangent to each other. So I don't want this line to be tangent to this arc. I don't want a relationship between the two. So I can just select this constraint, and you can find it down here. Notice it's a tangency constraint. So I can delete it from here, or I can delete it from here. I can just right click and delete. Notice it's no longer over constraint. All right, so now let's add a constraint to this vertical. Actually, you know what? Let's do the horizontal first, and then we'll come back to the vertical. That's a little more difficult, and I'll explain why in a minute. Okay, so let's do overall height. Okay, so the overall height is 5.26 inches from the base all the way to the top, so 526. So let's add a dimensional constraint from this horizontal, or we can do it from the horizontal axis. Either one is fine. Up to this one. Okay, double click, and that's 5.26, 526. There it is. Okay, so click in space or hit escape on the keyboard to deselect. Now we need a horizontal dimension to lock this one in place, as you can see, right? All right, so let's go find. Whoa! Somehow it auto created a constraint, which was. So I want you to notice that it actually created a tangency, and this is something fairly new, where if you were to move a line close to something else, it'll auto-generate a constraint, and this is fairly new in CATIA. I know SolidWorks does this. So I didn't mean to add this tangency when I was moving the line around. I don't want it tangent to this arc, so let me go ahead and delete that. Yeah, so as I was moving the line, it was looking for a relationship, and notice how it's giving me a preview that it's adding a relationship to the little arc, which I don't want. Okay, so that's actually a pretty cool feature that you can move and it'll auto detect the relationship, but that's not what I wanted. Okay, let me click in space. Okay, so it's white, it's still free to move horizontally. Okay, so let's look for that dimension. And yeah, the reason I wanted to wait for this is like, hey, where is this dimension? We don't know where that dimension is at. It's actually here. I think it's up here on top. Yep. Actually, I may be incorrect. No, there it is. It's this dimension, 0.60. So it's 0.60 from this edge to this edge. Okay, so in other words, from this surface to that surface is 0.60. Okay, this surface to this surface is 0.60. In other words, from this line to this line is a 0.60 horizontal dimension. Same thing on the opposite side. From this line to this line is 0.60 inches. All right, so let's go back. All right, so let's add a dimensional constraint from this horizontal, my mistake, this vertical to this vertical. Double click on it, and it's 0.60. And okay. All right, something looks a little off. Let's go back. Actually, it does look right. Double checking my dimensions, making sure nothing's off. 228, 26. Actually, it looks right. Okay, so now we're going to add the radius of 0.26. And by the way, if you type in an incorrect dimension, I'm not going to take points off on the assignment. I probably just inputted a wrong dimension, but that's okay. I'll just keep on going. If I catch it, I'll come back and fix it. Okay, so this has a small radius of 0.26. There's two of them, so the 2x tells you that there are two of them. 1, 2, right? All right, so let's add that fillet radius of 0.26. So we're going to use the fillet command or corner command. Here it is, corner. Click on it. I'm going to click on the vertical. Click on the arc. And notice it starts giving me a radius. So I'm just going to guesstimate the size and click. And this should be 0.26. So I'm going to double click on it. 0.26 to change the radius. And okay. Okay, so there it is. All right. Something still looks slightly off. Let me double check here. That looks right. 0.90, 0.60. Pretty sure some of you are probably screaming at this video saying, oh, you missed this. All right, let me just keep on moving. Moving on. Oh, yes. So it's the slot. I didn't put the wrong dimension for the slot. I thought the slot was 228 from center to center, and it's not. It's actually 0.48 from this edge. So I need to go in and fix that. Okay, so this is 228. I thought the slot was 228 center to center. I was wrong. It's actually 0.48. So those of you that were screaming at the YouTube video, sorry I ignored you. But here we are. We're going to fix this. So 0.48 from this edge to the center of this slot. 0.48. So let's go back and fix that. All right, so I need to get rid of this 228, which doesn't belong there. So I'm going to right click, delete. Okay, so I'm going to grab this arc and I'm going to stretch it to the left. Okay, click in space to deselect. Okay, so I'm going to add a dimensional constraint. Okay, so dimensional constraint from this vertical to this center point, and it's 0.48. Okay, so double click, and we have 0.48, and okay, and there it is. Okay, that looks cleaner. Okay, so a lot better. Something looked like it was off, and okay, I'm glad we caught it. All right, so everything's green, everything's looking good. Now this other half, we still have to create it. And we're going to use the symmetry command to create the portion on the right. Okay, so we know it's symmetrical. If we go back to the drawing, you can see it's symmetrical. Okay, so And later on, by the way, we're going to come back to these little tabs. That'll be in a separate sketch. So we're going to ignore these tabs and also ignore the back portion. All right, so let's go ahead and mirror the rest of it over. Okay, let me click on normal. I want to make sure everything's lined up. If you click normal again, it actually rotates it 180. All right, so I'm going to hold on to the control key and select all the items I want to mirror over. So I'm going to pre-select the geometry I want to mirror over. Okay, there it is. I'm going to let go of the control key. Okay, so I let go of the control key. I pre-selected the items I want to mirror over, and here is the mirror command. If you don't see the mirror command, you're going to have to either dig out the toolbar, right? You can always dig it out. If you can't find the command for some reason, maybe it got buried, maybe you accidentally turned off the toolbar, you can always go to Insert, and it gives you options here. Transformations, there it is. There's the mirror command. Okay, so if you go to Insert, you should be able to find the commands, same ones you see in the toolbar, at least most of them. Not all of them, but most of them. Okay, so there's the mirror command. Okay, so I'll just pick it from here, from the toolbar, mirror. Not to be mixed up with symmetry. Symmetry will actually turn the original geometry, in our case the geometry on the left, it'll turn it into construction geometry, which we don't want. So we want to use the mirror where it keeps the original. Okay, so mirror, and we're going to mirror about the vertical. Okay, 3, 2, 1, click, and there it is. It mirrors it over. Now if we would have used symmetry, the second option, if we would have used symmetry, it would have turned all these into construction elements, into dashed lines, just like the center line here for the slot. So the center line for the slot, I'm going to move this over to the right so you can see it clearly. Notice this is dashed. So this is a center line or a construction line for our slot. It's not part of the final sketch, but it helps us center the slot. Okay, so that's the reason we keep this line and keep it as a construction line. We can always turn it to a solid line by selecting it and clicking on Object Line. Turns it into a solid. But when we try to create a pad or extrude from the sketch, it's not going to like this line. Okay, so, and let me actually show you when we do sketch tool analysis. So let's do a tool sketch analysis. Tool sketch analysis. It's like, hey, there's something wrong. There's a line there. There it is. There's a line that's isolated. And we don't want to delete it. We can always delete it by clicking on the eraser. But instead, I'm going to turn it to a construction element, dash line. See, now it removes it from the list. It's a dash line. Okay, we have a close profile, the slot, and then we have the overall periphery. That's closed, right? There it is. Closed. It looks good. If there's any errors, it'll show up in blue cyan circles. So you want to see closed. If it says open, that means something is overlapping or it's not closed. So if you end up with the cyan circles, most likely you're going to see it in this area or this area. Okay, so you have to go in there and fix it. All right, so we're good. So we can close this. Okay, so we have two close profiles. Looks good. And now we can exit. All right, so let me click in space to deselect. Okay, so as we're creating our geometry, notice we are in part design. We are in part design. Let me close the sketch or close the branches. All right, so as we create the pad or extrude, it's going to take the sketch and tuck it under the pad feature. Okay, so watch what happens to the sketch in the tree. Okay, so we're going to create pad, same as extrude. Okay, so once we select our sketch that we're going to pad, notice it's going to take the sketch and tuck it under the pad. Okay, see how now the sketch is tucked under the pad. Okay, so we need a thickness. So we need to give it a thickness. So we're going to give it a thickness of 0.44. Okay, so 0.44. Okay, so there's the 0.44 thickness. Okay, type in 0.44 and okay. And there's our solid. Okay, so that's our first pad, our first sketch. And now we're going to go ahead and add to it. So now we're going to focus on the back side. All right, so we're going to create the back side, which has an overall length of 250, right? 2.50. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a sketch on this back surface. Okay, so create a sketch on the back surface. We're going to create this rectangular pad back here. All right, so I'm going to rotate. Okay, you can always use rotate over here if you want, and just left mouse click to rotate. Okay, once again, if you want to rotate using the icons, click on rotate and just left mouse click and rotate. Okay, or you can always go to the wheel, hold the right button at the same time, and move the mouse to rotate. All right, so on this back side, we're going to create a sketch. We can do it on the solid here, or we can do it on this vertical plane. I prefer the plane. Notice the plane lines up with the back surface. Okay, so I actually prefer the plane, but I'll just go ahead and pick the back surface, okay, to sketch on. Okay, I'm going to create a sketch on that back surface. There it is. All right, so I'm going to use existing geometry in the background to project into my sketch. Okay, this is a little confusing, but you can borrow geometry and bring it into your sketch, geometry that's out in space. So this solid is out in space, and we can project edges and surfaces onto our sketch, and it'll come in as wireframe or lines or curves, etc. Okay, so I'm gonna introduce you to project. Okay, so if you don't see project, it's below the symmetry, or I should say mirror command. Look for corner, chamfer, and go all the way down to project. So we're going to project existing geometry from the background. All right, so I'm going to project this edge and OK. Then click and space to deselect. Notice it comes in as yellow. I'm going to project this edge. Hit OK. Notice it comes in as yellow. Deselect. And I want you to notice in your new sketch, sketch number 2, it creates this branch of the stuff that you have projected over, as you can see. So I'm going to pre-select. I'm going to hold on to the control key and pre-select all the edges I'm going to project. This one, this one, this one, that one, this one, and this one. Make sure you select the edge and not the surface. Okay, and then we're going to project and OK. And notice we have all these projections. Click and space to deselect. Notice it comes in as yellow. Okay, one thing you can do when you're creating a second sketch and you don't want the background to get in the way, maybe you don't want to accidentally select anymore from the background, you can go to this option here and say, hey, I don't want to select the background by mistake. I'm done selecting the parts that I did want, which is shown in yellow, which you projected. You can click this option here where it grays out the background. You can still see it, but notice I can no longer select anything from the background. So I'm done selecting what I needed, which is shown in yellow. Notice I can't select anything in it anymore because I've chosen to go with the low light option, which darkens the background. If you want to completely turn off anything in the background, you can pick the one at the end. No 3D background. Notice it doesn't show anything in the background anymore. And sometimes we want to turn things off when there's just so much data in the background. For what we're working on in class currently, it's not too complex, so we don't have to turn it all the way off. But in some cases where you're dealing with a lot of geometry in the background, you may want to go all the way to no 3D in the background. I'm just going to go to low light, the one in the middle. Okay, so now we need to create a line going across. So our sketch is almost done. All we need is a line going across and we'll have our sketch. Okay, so we need to create this line, which is at 1.26. Okay, so we're going to create this line which is shown as hidden in this view. That line represents this back surface here, this top surface for this rectangular backside. Okay, which is this line. Okay, so this line, you can see it lines up with this dash hidden line. Okay, so let's create that line at 1.26. Okay, so we're going to create a solid line. We actually don't go to this corner. We actually have to go a little bit lower. And click and space. So notice the endpoints are locked to these yellow construction lines that we borrowed, right, from the background. All right, so now let's go ahead and put a dimensional constraint. So constraint from this horizontal to this horizontal. Double click and it's 1.26. And there it is. Okay, and click and space to deselect. So there's our sketch, there's our profile, but now we have excess. We need to get rid of this excess that we don't need. So there's two ways of doing this. Let me show you one way. We have the trim extend. So we have fillet, chamfer, and trim extend. So this will close a gap or remove excess. This is the trim extend command. So if I click on it and click the portion you want to keep. I want to keep the bottom portion of the yellow line. Click. And notice it's going to extend. We want to extend it up to this line and remove the excess up here. So let me click on this green line. Click. Notice now the bottom portion is solid. That's what we want. And the top portion is dashed. Keeps it as a construction line. Okay, so now we got to do the same thing on the opposite side. We can do the same thing, or we can use, instead of trim extend, we can use the eraser. So this is quick trim. Quick trim will remove excess, but it may in the process remove some constraints, thinking you may want to delete them. So keep in mind when you use the quick trim eraser, it'll remove excess. As you can see, there it is, but it may also unintentionally delete constraints like relationships or dimensional constraints. All right, so there's our sketch. Looks good. Let's do a tool sketch analysis. And it's closed. Now, if we didn't trim off the excess, it would have given us an error, letting us know here in sketch analysis. Okay, but we already trimmed off the portions we didn't need, so everything looks good. Closed. Now we can exit the sketch. Okay, let's click and space to deselect. Let me go ahead and collapse this sketch. Okay, so there's our sketch number 2. And now we're going to do another pad. Okay, so let's do another pad or extrude of sketch number 2. Notice when I click on sketch number 2, it's going to tuck it underneath our pad. There it is. It tucks it under. And it's going to gray it out. Just like sketch number 1, it's been turned off. Or hidden, I should say. So currently our sketch is showing. Once I hit OK for pad, notice it grays out the sketch. It's in the background. So if you ever want to go into the background, go to the swap visible space. Notice our sketches are in the background. Sketch 1 and sketch 2 are in the no-show layer. We can always click back to come back to the model space layer. Okay, so I didn't input a length on the pad. So let's go find out what is that length. So the length of the pad is 250. So we're actually extending from this surface. So we actually have to go 250 minus 0.44. Okay, because we're not extending or extruding from this surface, we're doing it from the back side. So it's 250 minus 0.44. So let's double click on pad number 2. Double click. Okay, so I'm going to type in 2.50, no units. And I'm going to let Katia do the math for me. I'm going to go minus 0.44. And don't type in units. Okay, so 250 minus 0.44. And hit OK. Or preview, I should say, preview. Notice it did the math for me. 250 minus 0.44 is 2.06. And OK. There it is. We're done with that part. Okay, so now let's focus on the tabs. Okay, so now we're going to create a sketch up on top. So let's create a sketch on the top surface. Okay, so let me rotate slightly. Okay, I just want to show you that we are on the top surface. Let me click normal. All right, so we're going to create these tabs that are at the corners. Okay, so these tabs, as you can see, they lined up with the edge. Okay, and they have a radii of 0.30 and a hole, circular hole of 0.19. And notice the distance from this edge to the center is 0.26. Okay, so let's go ahead and create this tab. Okay, so I'm going to slightly rotate. So I want you to see how I'm going to pick this line. Okay, so I'm going to pick this line. I'm going to project it. Going to project it into my sketch. And hit OK. And then click out in space. Okay, so notice we are in sketch 3. Hit the plus to open this up. And there's our project. Okay, so I actually don't need anything else from the background anymore. So I'm going to, notice I can still pick from the background if I want to, but I don't need to anymore. So I'm going to gray out the background. There it is, low light. And I can no longer pick anything from the background. Okay, now this line I projected, notice it comes in as yellow. I'm going to turn it into a construction element. Dash line. Click in space to deselect. Okay, and let me click normal. I'm going to click normal to screen. There it is. Okay, so I'm going to create my tab using this as a construction element to build around. Now, the one thing you're going to forget is to turn back on solid lines, object lines. So it's still in construction mode. So if I start creating lines, new geometry is going to come in dash, which we don't want. Okay, so you got to turn this back on. But first click in space to deselect or hit escape. Then go back to solid. There it is. So now it'll create solid lines. All right, so let's go ahead and create our tab. So using the profile command. Then I'm going to go with tangent arc. I'm just guesstimating the position and the size. There it is, vertical, and click, click, and click. Okay, now it's closed. Click in space to deselect. And now we can throw in our dimensions. All right, so let's go ahead and throw in a radius. And let's see that what that radius is. So the radius is 0.30. And the center of the arc to the edge is 0.26. So let's throw in that 0.30 radius and 0.26 offset. Okay, so let's put in, oh, we already threw in the radius. Now let's throw in our offset from the construction line to the center. There it is. Okay, so let's double click. This is 0.26, I believe it was, 0.26. And the radius is 0.30. Okay, so there's our tab. Now notice this object is white. Maybe yours turned green. Mine turned white because it didn't auto-generate a horizontal like this one. So I'm missing a horizontal. Watch when I grab the white line. Notice how it changes angle. I want it to be horizontal, so I'm going to select it and give it a horizontal constraint. There it is. Okay, click and space, and now it's green. Okay, so now we got to throw in the hole, the circular hole. Okay, so the hole is 0.19 in diameter, and it's centered about the arc. Okay, so 0.19. Let's go back. Okay, so we're going to add a circular hole at the center of the arc. Click to position it or to generate a diameter. Let's add a dimensional constraint. I already forgot it's 0.19, so 0.19 diameter, not radius, but diameter, 0.19. Notice it has a D letting us know its diameter. For the arc, it's an R for radius. Okay, so double click, 0.19. Notice its diameter. If you don't get diameter, you can always go to the pull down to change between diameter and radius and vice versa. We want diameter, 0.19 inches, and OK. All right, so now we can use symmetry again, or my mistake, mirror. So I'm going to just left mouse click and hold, and I can just drag across to select all the items I want to mirror. Or you could have done it individually, right? You could have pre-selected everything like holding onto the control key. And then we're going to use mirror, and we're going to mirror about the horizontal axis. There it is. Okay, now let's do a tool sketch analysis. Make sure everything looks good. Tool sketch analysis, everything's closed. Notice there are 4 profiles, 2 circles, and the tab profile, 2 of them, for a total of 4 profiles. And everything's closed. Okay, so we can close now, and now we can exit. And now we're going to pad downward. Okay, so let's do pad. Let me first find out what that dimension is. Okay, and it's 0.56. Okay, 0.56. Okay, so we're going to do a pad. Notice it's going in the wrong direction. Okay, so you can always click on the reverse button, reverse. And we're going to type in our dimension of 0.56. And OK. And there it is. Okay, so there's our part. Now we're not done yet. We need to create a hole in the back. Okay, so we do have a hole. And here are the dimensions, 0.82. And it happens to be centered, 0.14 from the edge. Okay, so what we're going to do is we can either create a sketch with a dot and then use the hole command. So we can do a sketch with the dot for the center of the hole. Or what we can do is, instead of having to create a sketch, we can skip that by holding onto the control key, select this edge. While holding onto the control key, select this edge. And then pick the surface to drill the hole through. Add a diameter of 0.41. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so let me rotate this. Okay, so once again, we're going to pre-select these 2 edges. I'm going to hold on to the control key. Make sure it's the edge. Notice it's red. If you accidentally click the surface, it'll show in orange. Okay, so let's click and space to deselect. Hold on to the control key. There's the edge. Good, it's red. Select this edge. It's red. Okay, now you can let go of the control key, and now we're going to create a hole. So by pre-selecting those 2 edges, it's going to help us position it horizontally and vertically. So now click on the hole command. Click on the surface, so it'll create a hole normal to the surface with respect to those 2 edges that were pre-selected. So now we do select the surface. And it's hard to see, but it creates these dimensions. I know they're hard to see. Let me rotate, actually looking for it. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in. I'm actually having trouble finding. Oh, there it is. Oh, it's hard to see, but those are the dimensions. There they are. If you have trouble finding these dimensions, you can always play around with the lighting. If you go to View Lighting, you can always turn off the lights, and it's easier to see the dimensions, as you can see. You can turn on more lights if you like. Okay, so once again, go to View Lighting if you want to turn off the lights or turn on more lights. All right, so let's go ahead and change these dimensions. So this one here is 114. So let's double click on this one, 1.14. Okay. Okay, notice it moved it over. Oh, also moved over this dimension, which is hard to see once again. Let me turn off the lights temporarily. There it is. There's the dimension. Okay, let me turn the lights back on. Okay. Okay, so we need to change this dimension, and we also need to change the diameter. Okay, so that dimension from this edge, from this inside edge to the center of the hole is 0.82. So we're going to go with 0.82 for the distance, and then 0.41 for the diameter. Okay, so double click on this one, that's 0.82. Okay, and our diameter is 0.41. So left mouse click and select this so it's blue. Diameter is 0.41. And as far as the depth, we can say go up to next, up to the next surface. Or you can say through last. We'll get the same result. We can say up to next, which is the next surface, which is the one below the top surface. So this is up to next. Preview. There it is. Or you can play it safe and say, hey, I want to go all the way through the entire solid up to last. And okay. And there it is. There's our part. If you want to add some color to it, you can always right click on the part body, properties, go to graphics tab, and you can give your solid a color. I'll go with blue. Okay, there's our part. Okay, so let me double check. I think we're done, and we're going to go ahead and save it. Yes. Looks like we got everything on this one. All right. And once again, if you did use the wrong dimension by accident like I did, I'm not going to take any points off. What I want is for you to learn how to constrain your sketches and how to use the pad command and other commands, like the whole command. All right, so let's go ahead and save our work. Okay, so problem 4-1. So file, save or save as. We haven't saved it yet, so we can go ahead and save. Save it on your flash drive. Save it on your desktop. So I'm going to save it as problem 4-1 and save. All right, that's the end of this video. See you in the next one.